There's a famous story told about a celebrated rabbi who on Kol Nidre night walked into a packed synagogue. And before the services began, he stepped onto the bima and faced the ark and cried out with powerful sincerity, "I am nothing, I am nothing." A moment later, the cantor, moved by this profound show of humility, joined him at the front, beating his chest and declaring, "I am also nothing, I am also nothing." Suddenly, the synagogue's president, feeling the immense weight of the moment, stepped up as well, proclaiming, "I am also nothing, I am also nothing." At that point, a man in the back, an ordinary congregant, perhaps feeling the spirit of the day, got caught up in the emotion, stood up and shouted, "I am nothing too." The synagogue president turned to the rabbi, a look of utter disdain on his face, and whispered, "Look who thinks he's nothing." It's an old story with a funny punchline, but profoundly true in its essence. It illustrates the cunning paradox of pride, a sin so subtle, so pervasive, that it can hide in the very act of proclaiming our humility. It reminds me of the congregant who once told me, "Rabbi, I've spent the past year working on humility, and I must say, I'm quite proud of myself." Pride is a tragically misunderstood sin. In today's world, it's often not seen as a sin at all, but as a prerequisite for success in life. We tell people we're proud of them all the time. We celebrate self-reliance and the relentless pursuit of self-interest. We have pride parades and pride festivals. In professional life, a healthy sense of self-worth is not just effective, it is often demanded. I had a friend from my high school class. Let's call him Alex. He was brilliant, an abnormally gifted software engineer. After years at a major tech company, he decided to launch his own startup. He poured in every waking hour, every dollar, every ounce of his intellect. His guiding motto was simple, absolute, and all-consuming. "I've got this." When investors told him his plan was unrealistic, he walked away. "I've got this." When an early backer offered mentorship, he turned it down. "I've got this." He didn't need guidance. He didn't need help. We all cheered him on. We admired his hustle as his dreams slowly came to fruition. The tech press hailed him as a visionary, a man of conviction, an out-of-the-box thinker, a genius. And when his company finally launched, it was an overnight sensation. The app went viral. His company was worth millions. Alex became a celebrity, a hero of the American dream, the self-made man. This all happened about a decade ago, but I saw him again recently, and the picture looked very different. His business is still thriving, don't get me wrong, but his personal life is in ruins. His marriage collapsed, his children distant, and his friendships few. The same pride that made him unstoppable in business made him impossible in relationships. "I've got this," the very words that built his company, left him utterly, devastatingly alone. And this is what makes pride so uniquely dangerous. It disguises itself as strength, even as it quietly corrodes the very bonds that make life worth living. In the office, pride may look like strength. At home, it hardens into coldness. In the marketplace, pride may look like conviction. In faith, it becomes divine rebellion. It is a sin that takes many forms: self-righteousness, entitlement, unyielding stubbornness, and even the illusion of humility. It is tragically easy to recognize in others, but almost painfully difficult to admit in ourselves. But Yom Kippur forces us to confront it as we stand before God and ask for forgiveness. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha begasut haruach, for the sin we have sinned before you with pride. A better translation of that Hebrew, gasut haruach, might be coarse spirit or arrogance of spirit. The image is of a person whose spirit has become thickened or inflated like a piece of wood that has hardened and swelled, making them insensitive to others and ultimately to God. The world may tell us that this hardened spirit is the engine of success, but the Torah warns it is the seed of destruction. In the Torah, pride is never a virtue. It is always a sin. The book of Proverbs: the Lord detests all the proud of heart. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Moses warns in the Torah, your heart will become proud, and you will forget the Lord your God. Nowhere does the Torah say, be proud. Instead, it tells us story after story of pride being the wedge that turns heroes into victims of their own flaws. Think of Adam and Eve, the Tower of Babel, Joseph, Pharaoh, Korach, Moses, King Saul. I could go on and on. For the great 19th century Rabbi, Yisrael Salanter, pride is not just a sin, but the root of all sin. For him, pride creates a kind of spiritual blindness that utterly distorts our judgment. We become unable to see our own faults or to hear genuine rebuke, and so we remain stagnant, locked in our own spiritual poisons. He also taught that pride corrodes truth and distorts religious and community life. We become less interested in developing relationships with others and more interested in protecting our own image. So many of the sins we confess over the next day are rooted in pride: gossip, arrogance, dishonesty. How many relationships have been irreparably broken because someone was too proud to apologize? How many arguments have continued for years because one person refused to say, I made a mistake? How many grudges are we holding on to because forgiving would mean admitting our own pain or vulnerability? I don't think there's any story that illustrates the dangers of pride better than the story of Purim. That may surprise you, but the Zohar explains that we should read the name of this holiday, Yom HaKippurim, as Yom Kippurim, a day like Purim, because the deep underlying lessons of both holidays are profoundly similar. To jog your memory, the book of Esther introduces us to a man named Haman, who was promoted to the highest position possible next to the king. He was given ultimate authority, and all the king's servants were commanded to bow down to him. But there is one character Mordecai, who neither bowed down nor paid him homage. This is where the poison of pride kicks in. Haman became not just annoyed, but filled with rage instantly. Haman felt he was entitled to this obedience. He insisted that people should bow down to him, the very signature of the proud person. A few chapters later, the Megillah tells us that Haman went out that day initially so happy, so pleased. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, and he did not stand up or tremble before him, Haman was filled with anger again. Here was Haman, a man with unparalleled power and influence, yet so bothered by a single silent act of one individual. He went to his house, the Megillah says, summons all of his friends and his wife. Haman recounted to them the glory of his riches, the number of his sons, every instance where the king had magnified him. And then comes the chilling line in the Megillah, Kol ze einenu shoveh li. All of this does not satisfy me every time I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Haman allowed one person to steal all of his accomplishments and all of his joy. And his pride leads immediately to other, more dangerous and serious sins. His friends, just like my friend Alex's circle, instead of calming Haman down, they inflate his ego, telling him some version of, "You got this. Build a gallows. Ask the king to hang Mordecai on it." And you know the rest of the story. It is Haman who ends up hanging on those gallows in the end. We tend to think of Haman as some cartoonishly evil villain. But the story the Megillah tells is far more realistic. It's the account of a senior, successful, and wealthy man, blessed in his family life and his professional life, who simply cannot accept that one person is not deferring to his authority. It makes no sense for him to allow Mordecai to steal all of his joy, but for the proud, success is not about personal achievement. It is about relative achievement. For the proud, every fellow human being is first and foremost competition. Instead of seeing our common humanity, we see an opportunity to pit our intellect, our opinions, our works, our wealth, our talents against theirs. As C.S. Lewis wrote with profound insight, pride gets no pleasure out of having something, only out of having more of it than the next man. A proud person doesn't simply enjoy their beautiful home, they enjoy it because it's bigger than their neighbors. A proud person doesn't simply feel good about their promotion, they feel good because it puts them higher on the corporate ladder than their colleague. A proud person is trapped in a constant, exhausting game of comparison, a zero-sum struggle for superiority. No wonder Haman was so enraged. No wonder he was led to further transgressions. The Talmud teaches a proud person cannot live in the same world as God, because a world with two ultimate sovereigns is a world that cannot endure. Consider our world today and how we are struggling to endure. Streets filled with angry protests every week in every major city in every country. We are divided, polarized, and prideful. In daily conversations, no matter what we're talking about, we find that most people aren't seeking truth, but proving to you that they already know it. We cling to opinions, defend them fiercely, and shut out dissent. Deep down, we buy into the toxic idea that strong people always have the answers and never show weakness. But that is not strength. True strength, the kind that builds societies, communities, lives, and indeed a better world, is having the humility to admit what you don't know, to ask questions, and to listen. Judaism calls this ideal being a Talmid Chacham. To be a Talmid Chacham is the highest accolade a scholar can receive. And it does not mean smart person who knows everything. Talmid Chacham means wise student. The greatest scholars are always students, always searching, always learning, always open, remaining humble, seeking to grow. And they make the world better. The Talmud actually says that explicitly. Talmidei Chachamim marbin shalom ba'olam. The more Talmidei Chachamim, the more peace in the world. And indeed, I think you will find that in every area of life, the best decision makers, the most impactful leaders, the wisest teachers are students, always students. That's what our fractured world needs more of. Less shouting, more listening. Less proving, more learning. Less pride, more humility. Yom Kippur helps us get there. We fast to remind ourselves we are not self-sustaining. We refrain from comfort to recall that our lives are not fully in our control. We stand before God with nothing, no food, no wealth, no status, and we bow in humble submission. In the ancient Yom Kippur temple ritual, the high priest recited the confession prayers and pronounced the ineffable name of God. The people, hearing this holiest utterance, prostrated themselves completely lying flat on the ground. We reenact this tomorrow during the Avoda service. Flat on the ground, all to acknowledge our smallness before the Creator and the futility of human pride. Consider what made our greatest historical figures strong. It wasn't the force of their will or the stubbornness of their ego. It was their remarkable capacity to transcend themselves, to put the needs of the community, the needs of their family, or their faith above their own personal feelings. They didn't become weak or diminished. They became greater because in those moments they understood that their wealth, intelligence, talents, and even their breath are not purely their own achievements, but blessings from heaven. This is why Judaism teaches that the strongest people are the most humble people. Pirkei Avot teaches, Ezehu Gibor, who is the strong one? It is the one who conquers his own ego. In truth, the more humble people we become, the stronger we become. We don't need to prove ourselves. We don't need constant validation. We don't depend on the world to tell us whether we have value or not. We rest secure in the knowledge that our worth comes from a higher place, and that our goal in life is not to be right all the time, but to do right as much as we can. Friends, the great tragedy of pride is that it waits. It waits for the other person to make the first move. It waits for the other to offer the apology. It waits for the other to show humility. And in our waiting, we lose the opportunity to heal and are left alone with the haunting echoes of the things we should have said and done. Yom Kippur is not simply a day of prayer. In our tradition, it is a deadline. It is our final chance, while we are still alive and well, to choose the path of humility before life itself, God forbid, chooses it for us. Look at the history of proud people. Those who refuse to bend in genuine repentance are often eventually broken by their own circumstances. Those who refuse to kneel in admission of their dependency are often brought low by the inevitable reality of our limitations. Those who will not humble themselves today might one day be compelled to be humble tomorrow. So on this holy day, we are offered the chance to be made whole. Let us not walk out of this service tonight encased in the heavy armor of our ego. Let us instead lay down our pride, open our hands and our hearts, exchange the weary, isolating lie of the self-made, I've got this man, for the profound truth of community and faith, our need for God and our need for one another. If we can do that, if we can strip away the armor, become Talmidei Chachamim rather than know-allers, prostrate ourselves not in fear, but in recognition of God's glory and our own true place, then Yom Kippur will not only bring us forgiveness, it will bring us freedom, a radical, resilient freedom. How so? It is the freedom of a man who no longer needs to compare himself to his neighbor, for he knows that his life has its own sacred purpose. It is the freedom of a woman who is strong enough to say, I was wrong, and in that confession discovers the strength to begin again. It is the freedom of a family who can sit together in honesty, no longer burdened by unspoken resentment, but restored by forgiveness. It is the freedom of a community that refuses to measure itself by status or influence, but by kindness and compassion. It is the freedom of a soul that knows its worth comes not from power, not from wealth, not from conquest, but from the unshakable, simple truth that it is a child of God. This is the promise of Yom Kippur, that through humility, confession, and courage, we do not shrink into nothingness, but rise into the fullness of who we are meant to be. Let us therefore profess today, not with the coarse spirit of arrogance, but with the quiet, heroic courage to prostrate in humility. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha, begasut haruach. For the sin we have sinned before you with our pride. Eloha selichot, O God of forgiveness, selach lanu, mechal lanu, kaper lanu. Forgive us, pardon us, grant us atonement.